Coming to you from the TheEoNProject Studios, perched high atop the banks of the majestic Blackstone River. Greetings from the jewel of the Blackstone Valley. You're listening to Experts of Nothing with Mike and Jay.
Hello there.
Hey, Mike, what's going on?
How are you?
Good to see you again.
I feel like I was just here.
Yeah, it's almost like you never left.
Almost.
Thank God we don't live together anymore.
No.
That would be bad.
That would be bad. So anyway, welcome to another edition of the Eon Project, where we do awesome things all the time.
We do all kinds of stuff. You know, we talk about the paranormal. We also debunk some of the paranormal as well because we like a little bit of credibility to this sort of topic.
And we like to talk about other things too, not just paranormal stuff, lost history, conspiracies,
That's right. Yep.
Interesting tidbits of news, things all related to that.
Absolutely.
So welcome. So last week's episode was episode 2 of a 3-episode arc, which today is episode 3 of 3.
That's right. This is the climax.
This is the pentuplet.
The what?
I don't know.
Oh.
Made it up. This is the ultimate ending of our 3-episode arc regarding the Amityville horror case.
That's right. Last week, well, actually, let me back up. So the first week we talked about the murders that took place.
Yep.
The Defeo murders. Last week was the paranormal claims of the Lutz family and the story and the book and the movie and everything that came to be as far as that's concerned.
Right.
And this week, we're going to play a past interview with Rick Moran. And Rick Moran is the founder of the Association for the Study of Unexplained Phenomenon. He founded that group in 1972.
Wow.
And he was a journalist, an investigator, a paranormal aficionado. And he's going to talk a little bit about his experiences and his knowledge about the Amityville cases, the Defeo murders, as well as the horror story.
Yeah. So we're gonna get to that interview in just a moment. But before we do, as we typically do on the show, we talk about some other things, some things that go on in our lives.
Yep.
Things that you're interested in, and we want to thank you for all the input that you've been giving us. We've been steadily climbing up the charts as far as reviews, people liking the show, and feedback. So I want to send out a personal plea, if I may.
Okay.
My personal plea is if you are listening to the show and you like our show, please tell a friend, tell a relative, tell a neighbor, tell someone who you think might enjoy the show as well. Because the more people we get listening to the show, the more reviews we get.
Exactly.
The higher we appear on charts and whatnots, and then more people will listen to the show. So what we want to get is the word out there that if you enjoy the show, pass it on. Don't keep it to yourself. This is not a secret.
No, and it's not. It's a lot. It's not as easy as one may think to garner support.
It is not.
Garner views and listens and things like that. You know, you go online, sometimes you see these viral videos,
right.
Millions of hits. It's not that easy.
It doesn't just happen overnight.
You know, I think one thing that is our detriment is that we're not on TV. Because if people could see our faces, they would fall in love with us.
Well,
and
either
they
would turn it off immediately.
No, we'd immediately have groupies.
Well,
we'd
actually,
have followers.
We were thinking about delving into the world of television, at least video, by doing some Facebook Live episodes of us visiting some of the places that we're talking about.
Right.
Maybe talking with some people. And so we're probably going to get that in the works here soon.
Yeah, we did.
But I wanted to discuss something real quick before we get to the Rick Moran thing. And as you know, we're at the end of September, right?
Yeah.
We're near the end of we're near the beginning of October.
Yep. Weather's cooling.
The fall season, the Halloween season. And I wanted to mention, for those of you who are fans of this type of stuff that we talk about, you're probably already aware. Those of you who are not, so there's a thing out there, there's a phenomenon, if you will, of haunted attractions around the world. And by that I mean places where you go and you pay some money and you walk through a haunted house and people jump out and scare you.
Right.
This is not new. This has been going on for many years. But I don't think people understand is that there's a lot of these professional and non-professional yard haunters and things like that. They put so much time and effort into their we call them shows, and I know this because I used to operate one myself, a charity haunted attraction, and probably will do so again in the future. But these people put so much time and effort. It truly is a year-round commitment to put on a good show. So I want to encourage people, go out there and check out a local haunted attraction in your area. I'm sure that there's a bunch. Find a couple, go to them, patronize them. They do a great job.
You know what they do? It's fun, it's entertaining, it's interesting. My only hang up would be some of them, because I've been to a few in my day. Some of them are really good.
Yep.
And they're reasonably priced. Some of them are terrible.
Yeah.
And they're overpriced. Well, and the line's out the door. I don't get it.
Well, the lines are out the door obviously because it's a It's something that a lot of people want to go do. But the funny thing is, if you ran a haunted attraction in May, you wouldn't get anybody to go to it. You run the same attraction in October, you have a line out the door.
It's kind of like the price gouging.
Yeah, so it's that time of year people want to do it. But to your point, there's a lot of bad ones that are only out for profit, and those are the ones that you see will pop up in like a storefront, or you see them in a temporary location, and the next year they're gone. But there's a lot that these people pour their heart and soul into. There's a couple that I'm very good friends with. That I hope to have guests on the show in the near future to talk about their haunted house, their haunted attraction, and it's a couple that I am friends with that live down in Red Oak, Texas.
Yeah, why don't you give them a plug?
Jen and Alex Lohman. They operate Reindeer Manor Haunted House, haunted attraction.
Reindeer Manor?
It's called Reindeer Manor.
Is it a Christmas themed Halloween
No, but
park?
you would think that by listening to it. Oh. No. So Reindeer Manor actually started in the 1970s. It's one of the oldest haunted houses in America, if not the oldest haunted attraction. And Jen and Alex actually have been doing this for a number of years. They started off doing a yard haunt, meaning that they just created a small environment around their yard, and it subsequently grew from there. And it's become like a world-class attraction. It's one of the scariest places I've ever been. It's not only is it scary because of the things that take place there, as far as the haunted attraction goes, but it's actually haunted in real life, and it's one of the only places where I've actually experienced legit paranormal activity was in this place.
Really?
So I hope to have Jen and Alex on at some point to talk about their show. This is the time of year where they literally have no time. They're busy 24/7 trying to get their show going. But we'd like to have them on. Check them out, reindeermanor.com. If you live in Texas, please check them out. Go down there. Tell them that Jay and Mike sent you, and they'll give you a hug or something.
Yeah, they will. They'll bring you backstage and...
well, hopefully not.
Oh, maybe.
They're going to tune you up a little bit.
Oh, could be. All right.
Anyway.
Yeah, no, that's a good plug, and, get out there and support your local businesses.
Support your local haunt.
Absolutely. So I think what we're going to do now is we're going to get back into playing the interview with Rick Moran, and God rest his soul, Rick actually passed away a few years ago, but Mike and I were fortunate and lucky enough to interview him, and actually this was our very first...
Yeah, I don't know how we got this guy.
Me either. This was our very first interview that we did on show number 1, I believe, or no maybe show 2.
It was 2 or 3, yeah.
Something like that, of when we were doing a AM radio program. And as you can tell, our skills are less than stellar.
Not as good as they are now.
But Rick likes to talk, so he kind of carried the interview for us.
Which is good for us.
It was interesting and enlightening, and basically being able to talk to somebody firsthand that was that directly involved with the Amityville case.
Right.
So I'm basically only 2 degrees separated from James Brolin.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the Kevin Bacon game?
Oh yeah,
where you have to be connected to somebody via 6 links or less from Kevin Bacon.
I'm connected 2 links to Kevin Bacon.
I'm connected 0 links to Kevin Bacon.
How's
because
that?
I appeared in a movie with Kevin Bacon in it.
Which movie was that?
I was in Patriots Day.
Oh, he was in that?
He was. He played an FBI investigator.
Oh, that's right. He was
and
terrible.
I played very, very famously
a
Massachusetts state trooper.
You get to see the back of your head.
You can see the back of my head, and you can clearly hear me yelling expletives at Mark Wahlberg. So I want you to check out Patriots Day. It's about an hour and 36 minutes in. You can briefly see me. You can definitely hear me, and it's not fit for children's ears.
No, definitely not.
I do yell some expletives.
So here we go. We're going to play the interview with Rick Moran, and we'll be back after this. So stay tuned.
Long time ago, me and my brother Kyle here, we was hitchhiking down a long and a lonesome road. All of a sudden, there shined a shiny demon in the middle of the road.
Welcome back to The Darker Side with Mike and Jay. Before we went to the break, we're trying to lay a little background as to the actual murders that took place at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York. So let me go ahead and give you the phone numbers again real quick. There's 766-1380. 769-0600, and if you're outside the area, you can call at 1-800-949-9674. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to bring Rick Moran on the line. Rick Moran is from the Association for the Study of Unexplained Phenomena. In 1972, Rick helped form ASUP in New York City. ASUP was actually recruited to investigate claims in the Jay Anson book entitled The Amityville Horror, that 112 Ocean Avenue was indeed haunted by demonic forces. They spent 2 years investigating that case to include the actual murders as well as the claims by the Lutz family that were terrorized by unseen forces. So let me see if we got Rick on the line here. Hi, Rick, you there?
Yes, sir.
How you doing tonight, sir?
Very good.
Good, good. We're going to get right into this, Rick. I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so we're going to try to get as much information out there as we can. So where are you? Where are you based out of right now, Rick?
I'm in a little town in East Texas.
Okay.
Called Wills Point.
Wills Point, and
ASUP's Texas office we base out of here, and we have about 50 field investigators.
Okay, so
about 50 cases a year.
ASUP or ASUP is still active in paranormal investigations then?
It certainly is.
So it's continuous since 1972 when they were formed, or?
That's right.
Okay.
So I would place you in the very, very small minority of groups that have been around for a very long time.
Well, you know, there are ghost hunters and then there are paranormal investigators. I like to think we're in the second group.
Well, that's probably safe to say.
Okay. But just talking about that real quick. So would you say that what you do is slightly different than what we see nowadays with the the prevalence of a lot of these so-called ghost hunting reality show type things? I mean, is there a difference in what you do as opposed to what they do?
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, first of all, we've had more than 35 years to hone our skills,
right,
and our methodology. So I think that we do it pretty well. We're not going out into the field is a lot of fun, but it's only about 20% of what we do.
Right.
And, we accept members, who come in and say, I really want to learn how to do this, and some of them last a couple of years, some of them last 10 years, some of them are still with us, but there's a lot of work that's involved. Reporting, report writing, the research that's involved in doing this, the concept of dividing things up into different types of hypotheses, and then after you've ruled out all the rest, if what's left is paranormal, then we hit gold.
So you would say that you go about it in a more kind of a scientific, basically kind of like a police approach in terms of your investigating?
Well, that was always the argument. The argument from the very beginning was that going back to the days of the Duke University studies, followed by I had a couple of friends that were down at Duke, and I went down there several times as a reporter. And I argued that the person who should be out doing field work is either a cop or an investigator reporter, because they know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take a PhD who's used to working in a lab and put him out into a haunted house because he's looking for empiric proof, which isn't going to happen.
And I can imagine that a lot of that, the investigative reporter and the police skills would be in the area of interviewing and determining the veracity of people's statements and looking into the reasons behind saying what they're saying.
It's a mixture of being able to do really, really good research, and then after you have that research, to be able to do one-on-ones with people, and not just hear what they have to say, but to read things like body language, and asking the same question 5 different ways to see if you get the same answer.
You definitely get a lot of that looking at a Butch Defeo interview.
Butch would be an interesting case study if you were just going to study him as from a criminologist point of view. I mean, my degree is in sociology.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, he's an interesting character because he changes his story so many times.
Right. Just so we can get a feel for what it, to kind of bring us back to the time frame of when the murders took place. When did you first hear about the Defeo murders, and was it at the time, was it a national story, as it would be today? Obviously, there's a lot of mass murders, unfortunately.
I first heard about the Defeo murders from a desk editor at a newspaper that I was stringing for, who said, go to Amityville, because they just had a mass murder.
Mm-hmm.
And I was out on the street that night with some of the people who later became prime players in this whole story. Paul Hoffman, who worked for the New York Daily News, was there. He later was asked to write the book Amityville Horror and turned it down and ended up in court with the Lutz family.
Mm-hmm.
Joel Martin from WBAB Radio, another guy who was very instrumental when we first started ASUP. He was the news director for WBAB. And we were all out on the sidewalk watching them take out the body bags.
Right. So you, I mean, obviously, it was almost physically impossible to get involved in the case earlier. Unless you happen to be there that night.
No, unless you happen to be, across the street when it happened, no.
Or in the house. Can you give us a little background on the Defeo family themselves and the personality makeups of the people within the family, and just to kind of set the tone here for why the murders might have taken place?
Well, you have Mr. Defeo, Ron Defeo Sr., who was a brute, and he admittedly made a point of brutalizing his family. We have Mrs. Defeo, who was suffering from, for want of a better term, Stockholm Syndrome. You had 4 kids, okay? The twins were young. I can't talk about them because there's no history. And the 2 older children, which is Ronnie Jr., who's called Butch, and, of course, Dawn Defeo, his younger sister. And Ronnie was a drug head and escapist and a bully, and like his father, and also a braggart. He liked to tell people that the family was involved with the mob.
Right. Actually, that was my next question. There's some speculation that Ronnie Defeo Sr. was involved in mafia and drug dealing type activities because his father and the wife's father were supposedly heavy into the mafia. Is there any truth to that at all? Or
they owned a car dealership which sold cars to the mafia.
That's connected.
But that doesn't make you a player.
Right.
No, I have some. At the time, I had some very, very close friends who knew the mob inside and out. There was no real connection there.
So they just basically like to invoke the name of the mob for social respect.
Yeah, well, you play the game. You talk the talk. Yeah, like I got these friends down in Brooklyn. They'll hit you for 10 cents. You know what I mean?
Right.
But was he a player? No, he really wasn't. I mean, the closest Ronnie Defeo Jr. got to anybody in the mob was he would get to drive a mobster's car to the mobster's house after they finished fixing it at the car dealership.
So there's no truth to the fact that because I know one of the theories put out there originally was that it was a mafia involved kind of hit.
Well, from the very beginning, Butch came up with this convoluted story which he told the police, which was he even gave the name of a hitman. Unfortunately, the hitman he named was in jail that week. But he was sure that it was a hit to get the drugs and money out of the house, but it wasn't there. It really wasn't there.
Now there was some speculation that, and this is one of the more one of the claims that's not widely known, and I believe that you may have some information on that the Defeos may have actually been under investigation by the federal government at the time of the murders.
The Defeos were of interest, or Ronnie was of interest with the DEA because he was making claims all over, southern Long Island that the family was involved. He spun an interesting story. He was into boats. They had a boathouse and a connected garage, and he created this story that he would take the boat out on the Great South Bay and meet a ship and get drugs there, and then bring it in to the boathouse, transfer it to a car, and of course then you don't have probable cause because you don't see anything being transferred, which is all very nice and very neat, except that it came right out of the bootlegger days. Mm-hmm. If we were back in the bootlegger days, that would have been a good story, but it didn't fit. Drug dealers don't bring ships into the Great South Bay so the little speedboats can come down and get it. They just bring it in by the truckload.
So would there be any truth to the allegation that maybe there was even surveillance being done of the Defeo home on the night of the murder?
The story is just that. It's a story. I first was told of it by a DEA person who swore that that there was an operative outside the house on the night of the murder, and had seen Dawn come out of the house with a package that looked like a rifle and drive out to the end of the peninsula where, of course, the murder weapon was then recovered later on, and then went back into the house, which would mean that she was alive when everybody else was dead. Mm-hmm. It was an interesting story, but again, it's anecdotal because it never made it into the record book, and it was being made by a couple of agents who said, that they believed that it was true and that that this is what had happened.
That's an interesting take on the story, when obviously originally it was just thought that Butch had committed all the murders himself, and then some of the stories that you read where Butch went ahead and killed the mother and father, and then basically Dawn did the rest of the dirty work and killed the children.
Everybody has a different version of the story.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
The version of the story that I tend towards, if I were going to lean towards just one version, the version that fits, okay, is the one that originally this was a conspiracy with Dawn and Ronnie to murder the parents. That would leave Ronnie, Dawn, and the two boys and the one little girl to live happily ever after. The despot would be dead, Unfortunately, in the version that I subscribe to, on the night when it was supposed to happen, Ronnie got stoned and couldn't get out of a chair. He was watching TV. The show on was The Keep, and he was watching the TV show. This is all going back to claims that he made to the police when he finally admitted, that he was involved in this. He said that a hooded demon came to him with gloves on and his rifle and said, "Go shoot them," but he couldn't get out of the chair, so the demon went upstairs and shot the mother and father, and there was a whole bunch of shooting, and the next thing he knew, he went upstairs and saw that the parents were dead, but also found out that the boys were dead and the little girl was dead. Now, that's the story that he gave. All right, well, that leaves Dawn as the possible, and that's where that anecdotal story seems to tie in, okay? Why would she do that? I have no idea.
Wasn't there there was a report that there had been a forensic test done on Dawn's night clothes, and that she did have some powder residue?
Oh, that's true. Yeah, Dawn's nightgown had powder burns on the right shoulder, which would be consistent with a long gun being fired.
But that avenue was not pursued by the police at the time because they had a confession.
Well, first of all, you have to understand something. You're talking about the Suffolk County Police Department in the 1970s, which in itself was not exactly the cleanest place in the world. And this was an easy in and out, let's get this done. We've got a bunch of, dead bodies, and we have to find somebody to charge it with it. And they wanted to put it to rest. And he was there. So what the hell? Now, of course, later on, right to this day, Ronnie and his wife are suing, are constantly, in court trying to get a reversal. Simply because, Dawn has now broken, no pun intended, if Ronnie had said, "I killed Dawn, I didn't kill anybody else, I just killed Dawn," and he pled to just one murder, he'd be out, a free man right now. Mm-hmm. But because, after talking to his grandfather, he copped the plea for all of them, he's in jail for forever because New York State just doesn't like mass murderers on the street.
So he was probably convinced to probably not bring any more shame upon the family by, one of the dead siblings.
That was the claim made by a police officer who was standing outside the door when his grandfather walked in and slapped him in the face and said, "Enough of this. Stop dragging the family through the mud. You did it. Admit it to it."
So is there any truth to the idea? And I know you mentioned earlier that there was the idea that Dawn and Butch, after the murder of the parents, were going to basically take over as the matriarch and patriarch of the family. Is it true that there were claims that they had an incestuous relationship between the two of them?
A couple of Dawn's girlfriends said that was a possibility. I never found anybody who's a friend of Ronnie's who said that. Ronnie was a player by today's standards. He had a fiancée. He had a girlfriend. He made passes in anything that moved. I don't know. I've heard that over and over and over and over again. I even heard it once from Bill Weber, who was his attorney.
Right, and it's alluded to that in the movies and even in some films that were supposedly inspired by these events that may have been going on, but I haven't read anything concrete about it.
One of the things that bothers me slightly is, I mean, all the bodies were generally found in the same positioning. I mean, how could that have happened? I mean, nobody thought they should flee the house.
Okay, here's the scenario as it plays out in my mind. Butch and Dawn agree that we're going to get rid of Mom and Dad. We have to get rid of Dad because, you know, he's brutalizing the entire family. Mom is a basket case, so she's going to be no help, and she's only going to be a hindrance. So we're going to do Mom and Dad. Okay. They probably told the kids that they were going to do it. This is probably a much larger conspiracy within the family. And so when the first shots go off, taking out Mom and Dad, the kids don't react to it at all. Now, it isn't true that they were all, you know, laying face down in bed. In the boys' room, one boy was face down in bed. The other one, who had a broken leg, was obviously trying to reach out to a pair of crutches to get out of bed. Mm-hmm. And you know, his body really was kind of hanging out of the bed. And the little girl, of course, was in bed. Mm-hmm. Now, we have no idea what the order was here.
Was there any? Well, I can say that I haven't heard any reports of neighbors hearing any of the shots. Was there any evidence that any kind of silencing device or an attempt to silence the weapon might have been made?
No, not at all. But the house is pretty tight. We tested that way back when, because I was interested in that. Mm-hmm. And the one time that we were in the house, I put some blanks into my off-duty revolver and fired it, and nobody heard anything outside. You could see the muzzle flash through the windows if you were looking. But
this would have been at 3 a.m, and there wouldn't have been anyone looking.
There wouldn't be anybody looking except for our theoretical, informant sitting out on the street for the DEA, which is anecdotal because we don't have corroboration that actually happened. Mm-hmm. But that was the claim. The other thing is that Ronnie used to use the basement as a target range. He was a gun nut. So it wouldn't have been surprise to somebody's ears if they did hear shooting.
Right.
Well, that's interesting. Getting back to the events leading up to the murders, if we could for just a moment. I know that there had been some reports that Ronnie had actually pointed a loaded shotgun at his father just a short time before the actual murders during a fight between Louise and Ronnie Sr. Mm-hmm. Has that been corroborated independently?
No.
Okay.
No. I've heard the story, but I can't corroborate that. Would it surprise me? It would only surprise me that he'd be doing it with a shotgun, because he did have a permit for a handgun.
Mm-hmm. Now, if we subscribe to the theory that Dawn was actually involved in the killings herself, why did she end up herself getting killed in the end?
Total rage. The one thing that we do know about Butch Defeo was that he adored his little baby sister, the youngest. And again, this is all theoretical, but he goes upstairs, he sees Mom and Dad dead. Well, that was the plan. Then he walks inside and sees the twins shot, and it's like, what the hell did you do? And then he walks in and sees the little girl shot, and the theory is that he took her upstairs and shot her with his handgun. That's why the ballistics on Dawn's bodily injuries do not match the other family members, because she used a long gun, a rifle.
Right.
He used a handgun.
And
when they asked him what did he do with the gun that he shot Dawn with, he says he threw it out into the river. But they were looking for a rifle.
Not a handgun.
They never found it.
And in most mass murders of this type, it would be consistent for the murderer to use the same weapon for everyone if that's in fact what happened.
If in fact it was in line, it's the same period of time. It would.
Now maybe you can clarify this. They did find the police did find by going on Butch's word that he dumped his clothes in a storm drain, as well as some of the empty shell casings from the rifle. Is that not true?
I don't know about the shell casings. I know about the clothing.
Okay.
Clothing was dumped down in Brooklyn.
Okay.
Again, it doesn't seem like it's out of the realm of possibility that this is a domestic abuse situation that ultimately ends in patricide, but just the added killing of the kids, which is, I think, really what the crux of what makes this a tragedy, as great a tragedy as it was. Whereas when you see interviews with Butch, he readily admits to killing the parents, and it's when discussing the murder of the children that he's obviously upset by it. He's ashamed of it if he in fact did it, and that seems to be the point of contention with him.
Right. And from the very beginning, people in the Amityville Police Department, who of course knew Butch intimately because he had been a troublemaker, readily admitted that he was a hothead, and shooting Dad and Mom wouldn't be a big thing, but they questioned whether he would actually shoot his siblings.
Mm-hmm. Since part 2 of the show next week, we're gonna focus on the the famous paranormal Amityville case that most of the people know about. You're laughing at that, sir. Basically, what I want to ask to kind of maybe set a little tone for that next week. Obviously, there's different theories of going as far as that's concerned, and we're not going to go into it too much now. But do you believe personally the story that there was actually an evil that permeated that house prior to the Defeos because of a history of Native American torture and death on that particular property?
Well, for starters, the book is a work of fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, for instance, the Indians that supposedly were there lived on the east end of Long Island. They would have not walked 70 miles to dump their aged infirmed
right
in Amityville. There weren't any Indians there. There's stories about the Ketchum family. Ketchum is if you live on Long Island, if you live on the North Shore of Long Island, Ketchum is a well-known historic figure, and he was not a witch. He didn't run away from Salem. All of that is filler and folderol. Okay, and it fits a predictable mold for books that were written in that genre at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when in doubt, you're running short. Your publisher wants 200 pages, and you got 160. What do you do? Well, we talk about Native Americans and long dead people. Okay.
And these books were written at a time in the 1970s when The Exorcist was huge at the box office, and the theory surrounding.
People don't understand. Jay Anson worked on the film The Exorcist. Okay, he was a screenwriter for The Exorcist. So if you see any connection there, it's because that was his thing. But Jay Anson and I got to be really good friends after all of this, and Jay finally said to me once, and this is a conversation that happened at the 21 Club. We were about to go to NBC to do the last show about Amityville after a year of road shows, and we sat there, and he says, "Rick, you know what your problem is?" I said, "No." He says, "You're missing the basics here." He says, "I'm a writer, you're a journalist. You want to corroborate everything. I don't have to corroborate anything. Mm-hmm. My intention was to build a house in Majorca. Yours was to tell the truth. Incompatible."
Well, do you think
we finished our steak dinners, went across the street, and did the last show?
Do you think that maybe the reason, one of the reasons behind the jump to blaming a lot of this on demons and the paranormal and ghosts and whatnot is because people find it hard to believe that a normal person or a human being would actually do that to their family?
No, the intention was, from the very beginning, Bill Weber wanted someone to write a book that would say that the Lutzes were chased out of the house by a demon. You see, I told you so. There's a demon in the house, and Ronnie was under the influence of a demon when he committed the murders. Therefore, he was not mentally stable. Therefore, it's time to give him a new trial.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't William Weber actually in a somewhat of a deal to write a different book besides Jay Anson's book with the Lutz family?
Yeah. the original book was supposed to be written. He introduced them to Paul Hoffman. Now, unfortunately, he did not realize that Paul Hoffman was a member of ASUP at the time. So Paul went to the meeting, and over several bottles of wine, they looked through the murder scene photos, the forensic photos. And that's where things like the green slime came from. Kathy Lutz looking at a photo, a color photo by the crime scene, and in those days they used graphite to be able to lift fingerprints. So when flash hits graphite, it comes up green. So she says, "Oh, what's that green slime?" And it was Paul Hoffman who said, "No, that's graphite. It's just the way it photographs," because he was a crime scene reporter first and foremost. And then, and it goes right down the line where all of these claims came from, and it was all concocted over a couple of bottles of wine. Well, much later on, there was a lawsuit, and they brought Paul into court, and the judge in the case, in the New York State Supreme Court, turned around and found, quote unquote, Amityville Horror is a work of fiction created originally over several bottles of good red wine and some crime scene photos.
So those that are listening that are not familiar, the Lutz family, George and Kathy Lutz, are the people that moved in a year after the Defeo murders, and it's widely believed, some people that obviously that don't know the complete facts, that the Lutzes didn't actually know about the murder prior to move in, but obviously we know that we obviously know that that's not true. They did know what occurred in that house.
Of course they did.
Right.
They lived in Deer Park. Everybody on Long Island knew about the Defeo murders.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know we are going to discuss this next week too, but for your appearance, Rick, if what do you make of the claims by the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, about their claims, and this case really was their bedrock for a career in paranormal investigation.
Yeah, sure was. It was a dog and pony show, okay, and that's how I got involved in this. Basically, they invited a field researcher from the Psychical Research Foundation at Duke. They said, "Would you like to see the house?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd love to see the house." They didn't tell him there was a press conference that night. So he and two friends came up to the house, and here are all the lights on, and everybody's squeezed into this little room, and there's Ed and Lorraine Warren and Hans Holzer and a whole bunch of other quote-unquote prominents. And they were told to sit down, and they sat down, and, a year later, here's Jay Anson saying in the preface of the original copy of the book that all of this is true because the PRF was there. And who would question something, that happened in the eyes of Duke University? Mm-hmm. And that's how I got involved. I had, Scott Rogo and I had debated at Duke long before this, the whole concept of who do you put out in the field? Do you put PhDs, or do you put seasoned investigators who understand investigating, like cops and reporters? I obviously argued for one. He argued for the other. Well, unfortunately, what happened at that press conference is they got themselves a lab rat, who certainly wouldn't have made a comment because he didn't investigate anything, okay? But his very presence suggested some claim to it being all true. And that got Bill Roll very upset at Duke University. And the word came out, can you prove that this book is a sham? And so 6 of us dedicated a good portion of our lives to proving that initially 118 claims that were impossible, okay? And then after that, pretty much, you can open up any page of the book. I can explain to you where it came from at this point.
Right. Now, you would say that, obviously, all the claims made by the Lutzes, were they, was that something that they thought moving in that they were gonna try to pull some sort of scam, or that do you really think?
There's some question. You got to start at the beginning. How long were they there? Some people say a month. Some people say 10 days. Some people say 3 days. Some people say they never really moved in. Okay. I think that it was their intention to try to make a buck off of this, and it worked out very well. I'll tell you this: in all of the programs that I've done about Amityville, I'm used to getting, when they have call-ins, somebody will call up and say, "Why are you saying these terrible things about George and Kathy Lutz?" And they go on to tell you what saints these people were. And usually my response, rather than trying to, it's kind of hard to debunk a saint, so I turn around and say, "Look, how old are you?" And they'll say, "Oh, I'm 22. I said, "Your parents weren't old enough to mate when this case happened.
Right.
What do you know about it?
Well, it's not hard to believe.
I can tell you the truth, but that doesn't mean you're not going to read the book and be scared half to death.
That doesn't mean also that they weren't. They intended to. Yes, maybe they were going to exaggerate some claims to maybe get out from a mortgage, maybe make some dollars. But their initial claims were taken and run with by exuberant members of the media.
Created by a producer, a young female producer who wanted to make her name on this. Boy, do I have a story for you guys, okay? And then inviting every one of the game players to sign on, including, Ed and Lorraine.
Now, that's not to say that, obviously there was a tragedy that took place in the home, and that's not to say that there couldn't be some sort of, residual energy that lingers in the home.
Nobody ever asked us that.
Right. They were just...
Was there?
Yeah, there you go.
I was at a Halloween party after all of the brouhaha, and we were in the house, and there was much partying and a couple hundred guests and the whole 9 yards, and people were actually coming to the door, who were not invited, who said, "Can I come in and see the house?" One of those deals. Mm-hmm. And we're all making jokes about this. And Steve Kaplan, who was one of the researchers, and Joel Martin and I were all sitting there and BSing back and forth. And we're pretty much saying, "Boy, what a load of they sold." Okay. About a half an hour later, I'm out in the kitchen with one of the original members of the ASUP, who was a PhD, who also happened to be psychic. And she said to me, "After it's all said and done, there is something in this house." Mm-hmm. Now, that doesn't mean it's a horned demon. Okay. It doesn't mean that it's something that would drive you berserk. Nor is it a 101-piece brass band in your living room at 3 o'clock in the morning.
No, but it would be consistent with a residual type haunting.
But it certainly would be consistent.
Okay.
But nobody ever asked that. You're the first person who's ever asked.
Well, thank you. We like to do first things on the show.
Well, Rick, I hate to cut this conversation short here, but unfortunately we only have an hour slotted, and right. I know that we only asked you to be on this hour, and you don't have to give us an answer right now, but we'd love for you to join us next week and maybe talk a little bit about the actual, some more myths surrounding the actual Amityville horror itself. So, is there anything else you'd like to say right now before we get going here tonight?
No. Anybody wants to know anything more about my group, the ASUP? I welcome them to go to www.asup-inc.org. And you will find a surprising website for most people, because most people used to go on a website and they have 2 or 3 pages. Mm-hmm. Our website is closer to 300.
Okay.
Now we talk about old cases, new cases, methodology, the whole 9 yards.
All right, Rick, we certainly appreciate that. And if you want to give your website out one more time for
www.asup-inc.org.
All right, Rick, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Rick, and obviously well-informed on the subject, to say the least.
And we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Good talking to you.
Bye-bye. All right, so that was the interview with Rick Moran, circa 2009.
You sound like a child, like a little baby.
I did. Well, you know what it is? That's the AM. We were in a studio with like.
It was tinny.
It was old. It was an old style radio station.
You know, we've mentioned this before on the air, but,
Yeah.
but that experience was generally just weird. It was a weird experience to have a radio show. We were there for about a year doing that radio show, and we literally had a key to the station. We used to come and go as we pleased.
That was the most weird of all, is that we went in there.
Yeah.
We told them what kind of show we wanted to do, and they immediately gave us a key.
He said, that's fine.
They didn't ask what our names were.
Didn't have anything written out. We could have went on there and started screaming expletives at the top of our lungs.
We could have stole everything out of the studio.
Well, there wasn't much in there that was... You know what? One of my most fond memories of the radio station was they had those old style phones with the buttons that you had to press all the way, like the different line buttons.
Yeah.
You'd press all the way and it'd go. It looks like a mechanical.
I couldn't
button.
figure out the phones. People would call in. I'd hang up.
You would
on
hang
them.
up on them. Yeah, that
you know
happened
what?
a lot.
The technology was so rudimentary. It was blowing my mind.
We didn't have call screeners. We used to get random calls from people. We didn't know what they were going to talk about. They would just, and it was live, so they would just get on the air and start talking.
Yeah.
We never knew what anybody was.
Had a dump button, but I didn't know how to use that either.
No, and everything was run by like pulleys and cables and.
But you know what? It was an interesting experience to say the least. I'd never done anything like that before, and look where we are today.
We're in somebody's basement.
All right, so that was the interview with Rick Moran. We're going to be back next week, maybe
Hopefully
next
with a
week
guest.
with a guest interview, paranormal interview, and we're going to get that going, and we'll continue with the knowledge and nonsense.
Check us out on the web at TheEoNProject.com and also on Twitter and MySpace.
And just remember,
I just said MySpace.
you did? You did say MySpace.
I said it on purpose to see if anyone would catch
Oh my God, that was awesome back in the day. All right, the truth exists. Believe it.